Hi, how you doing? A little while ago, I made a video entitled Why Grappling Works for Self-Defense. It proved fairly popular. I think it got about 14 or 15,000 views, and if I'm being honest, I didn't think I'd said anything particularly controversial in it. Turns out, I might have been wrong. The comments that disagree with what I said tend to fall into three broad categories. Those are, it's a sport, so it doesn't work in real life. If someone tried to grapple with me, I'd just do whatever. And grappling is too dangerous on the street. Obviously, these are all related to some degree, and there's quite a lot of crossover, but for the purposes of trying to make a coherent video, I'm going to try and address them individually. We'll see how that works out for me. Let's start with the sport objection first. Miss shit. Well, you want more? Okay, if I must. What people who use this argument usually say is something along the lines of sports aren't realistic. The fact that BJJ or wrestling or judo or MMA is a sport means that they've removed all the things that actually make it dangerous, and so it simply can't work in a real life situation. A BJJ grappler doesn't know how to block a punch. They leave themselves open. The fact that they focus on things that score points in competition means it isn't real fighting. To me, this just shows a massive lack of understanding of both what a sport is, and more specifically, why in BJJ certain things have points and other things don't. Let's look at an analogy. Say you were in a boat at sea, a couple of miles from land, and for whatever reason you fell overboard, or the boat sank. It doesn't matter what, but suddenly you're in the sea, with the waves and the salt and the cold, and you have absolutely no choice but to swim those couple of miles back to shore. Or die. That would be a nightmare. I'm sure you'd agree that the vast majority of people would be extremely ill prepared to deal with that, and likely would drown. But if you were a competitive swimmer, someone that trained several times a week and regularly competed, you might just think you'd have a decent chance. A sporting chance, should we say. Yes, you normally train in a swimming pool with its nice filtered chlorinated water, its complete lack of waves and wind, and a lovely climate-controlled atmosphere. But it isn't beyond the realms of possibility that the sort of competitive sport swimming you do would set you up pretty well to swim to safety should the situation arise where it was necessary. Almost as if those skills are transferable to a similar situation. But for whatever reason, some people don't seem to accept that combat sports are just as applicable for combat as swimming sports are for swimming, or running sports for running. We'll come back to this, but now we need to talk about points. There's a lot about the IBJJF rules that I dislike, but at their most basic level, the point system is there to allow us to see who has an advantage when a clear winner isn't obvious. It doesn't matter how many points you've scored against me if you tap out before the end of the match. But the things that win you those points are the things that would actually give you an advantage in a real fight. Taking someone down from standing, sweeping someone when they're on top of you, getting knee on belly, a position I have to say is massively underrated by people that have never experienced it in its true glory. They all get you points. Getting to mount or taking someone's back, and the one that really riles people, passing their guard. As soon as you mention guard, someone's going to start frothing at the mouth. They automatically assume that guard means lying flat on your back, inviting someone else to come and stand in between your legs. But in reality, guard is any position where you're on the ground and you have your legs in between your head and your opponent, which to me seems pretty sensible. All of these things that score you points are the very same things you need to do in order to stop someone hitting you, or get to a position where you can hit them. Or, well, both. I'd say those are pretty bloody good instincts to have in a fight where one or both of you is on the ground. All a sport really is a way of codifying the rules of a form of competition in order that people can enjoy watching it. If you needed somebody to run really fast, you'd probably be better off with someone from the local athletics club who trains in sprinting on a regular basis, rather than some bloke from down the pub who tells everyone he's really good at running because he practices real running, not that crappy sport running. Which leads us beautifully onto point number 2. Whether it's the ever-present eye gouging, the 2-inch punch to the kidneys, fish hooking, biting, low kick to the ankle, snapping their collarbone as they go to take you down, and my personal favourite, grabbing their head as they're hugging you and trying to twist it one way as hard as you can. People always seem to have their own version of the magic technique that can't fail and will undoubtedly destroy anyone fool enough to tangle with them. As you might expect, I have a couple of fairly strong opinions about this too. My first objection is simply based around the idea that you could actually do any of those things. Let's look at the eye gouge one, as that's the one that crops up an awful lot. The justification for this seems to come from a combination of factors. Firstly, that getting jabbed in the eyes is really unpleasant, and secondly, that it clearly works amazingly well. MMA fights are stopped all the time for eye gouges, so they must be more damaging than striking or grappling. Well, yes, getting something in your eye is deeply unpleasant, whether it's an eyelash off your own head or a large angry man's fingers. But the eyes are a really small target. I mean, a really small target. Boxers and MMA fighters miss their targets all the time, and they're just trying to punch a head or a body, something much bigger than an eye. They're professionals who train all the time to be able to do this, and they still miss much more often than they hit. Make the target as tiny as a person's eye, and the chances of you hitting it when you're stressed and being attacked is so small as to be laughable. And in reality, they aren't even that debilitating. The reason MMA fights get stopped for them is because they're against the rules. A fighter who gets even a slight eye contact is going to make a point of stopping the fight for it. They get a rest. Their opponent potentially gets a warning or a penalty. And if they go on to lose, they've got a perfect excuse already there waiting for them. It's the same with all of these so-called fight-stopping techniques. They are not easy at all, and a lot of the time, they simply don't work. The few that do, like the head-twisting one, are already valid techniques. As a catch wrestler, I've completely lost count of the amount of times I've attempted to tap someone with a neck crank. Quite a few of them successfully. But what that means is that people already train to avoid or escape them. The idea that because you know it's a thing means it's going to be simple to do is ridiculous. The basic fact of the matter is that the very concept of there being a magic technique that you can use that will defeat someone who is skilled and practiced at grappling is laughable. There is no such technique. And if there was, you wouldn't be able to do it. And yes, I am willing to back this up. If you think your amazing head-twisting thing will beat me, come down to the gym, we'll give it a shot. If your 2-inch punch will put me out of the game completely when I've got you pinned to the floor, come and show me. If you think that your striking will stop me from getting to mount on you and submitting you, you're free to give it a try. But do remember, I'm going to be striking too. And that's a really important point. Just because someone can grapple doesn't mean they can't strike just as well or even better than you. The only proviso to this is that we're going to video it so I can post it here on the channel. Anyway, let's put the testosterone away for a moment and move on to point number 3. The world is not the clean, sanitised fighting arena that your gym is, and so your grappling is likely to hurt you. The person you're grappling with might have friends. Those friends might have sharks. Those sharks might have laser cannons on their heads. The basic point of learning to grapple to be able to defend yourself is not so that you can proactively leap at strangers and take them down to the ground. It's to be able to stop the other person taking you down. To be able to get back up if you fail at that. It's to be able to beat them quickly if you can't get back up. It's to be able to get back to a situation where you have as much freedom to act as possible. Obviously, lying on your back on the floor while a bunch of strangers lay into you with a size 10s isn't a good thing. Nobody ever said it was. But the idea that you won't go to ground because you don't want to is the kind of pathetic bullshit that most people grow out of by the time they start school. Yes, there might be broken glass on the floor. Or maybe your former mentor's cut your legs off and is leaving you to die in a pool of lava. Either way, you not wanting to be there isn't relevant. Unless you're able to prevent it, you just have to accept it. While I'm at it, there are a few other things I want to say about grappling for self-defense, specifically wrestling and BJJ, because they're the ones I know. When you very first start, there are 2 things you can pretty much guarantee. The first is that you'll feel desperately unfit. You'll be gassed in seconds. And the chubby old man with greying hair who seems to constantly find his way on top of you won't seem particularly troubled by the same issues. Yeah, he's lightly sweating, quite a lot, but most of that sweat will be landing in your face and he'll be laughing at you as it does. Add the adrenaline dump of a real violent encounter into the mix, and you're going to be really struggling if you aren't used to it. All wrestlers, all BJJ practitioners are used to this. That gives them a massive advantage. Secondly, grappling and wrestling hurts. There are loads of positions where you hurting your opponent also hurts you. Not as much as them, but it still hurts. When someone better gets on top and starts crushing your face or compressing your chest so much you don't feel able to breathe, it's a truly horrific experience. But in reality, it's one you get used to pretty quickly if you're training regularly. Even if nothing else was true, the fact that grapplers and wrestlers are used to dealing with discomfort and pain means that they'll always win against someone who isn't, however amazing their magic Jedi chi blast is. If you've made it this far, then I'm going to assume that you either agree with me already, or you're so incensed by what I'm saying you simply can't stop watching. If you're in that second group, please, please, please go to your local BJJ class, or wrestling class, or judo, or sambo, it doesn't matter what. Spend a few months learning the very basics of grappling. If you do that, and you still think I'm wrong, then fair enough. Now, over to you. What do you think? Am I a veritable oracle, serving nothing but the cold hard truth to the world? Or am I a complete moron who doesn't understand the very basics of fighting? Stick something in the comments and let me know. I can't wait to read it. And a big shout out to all the channel members here. You guys rock. Fight team!